support the few numbers that we have. I don't see the option we're currently using being as functional as it could be.
I don't think our youth center is just a recreational. I know Joanne has a computer bank for helping kids with that, and I think right now that's the only thing that we've got in this city for our kids. And I think we need things for our kids. Exactly what you said, to keep them out of trouble, to keep them focused. And that's why I'm saying I believe it's a responsibility that we do things like that. And whether we privatize or send it out or take care of it in-house, my priority is if people are not participating, if we've got low numbers, why? What's going on? What can we do to bring those numbers up before we just cancel everything?
I mean, I was criticized for making a statement by one of the park board members because I said we tend to be a transient community. People move into our community for a short term with the expectation that they're going to improve their status and move on. And part of that is the way we've developed our community or allowed it to degrade, where other communities around us have improved to the point that they're more desirable. And that's so when you're in a community that you don't want to invest into, because you're looking to get to the community, to the place you want to be. They're not. That's why I don't think we have the involvement right now.
I don't know. We have a lot of homeowners that are.
We have a lot of
families.
Homeowners in town, but we have they're not really engaged. And
Why?
I don't know how we increase
Why?
that.
And I think the community services manager is that component. Let's find out why and get people involved.
You go to when we have a new website, we can use it for that too, as far as asking these questions, and you guys can ask it when you're out in the community. I don't want to get too confused with, the senior center is really the one that's down on attendance. The youth center is not. It's busy every day. I mean, in the summer, it's tremendous.
We do the free lunch program and all of that.
The kids there
never
all
want
the
to
time.
take any of that away.
Right.
And it's not my intent. It's to figure out how do we make this sustainable? How do we grow this? How do we build this? The way it's working now is not functioning the way that it should. I think it's not meeting the needs of our community.
Okay, so one next question. What if we know that the youth is being used? What if we focused our attention on the youth and eliminated the senior aspect of it?
Well, I would not turn my back on the seniors in this community.
I'm not saying I want to turn
that's what
my
you're
back.
sounding like, so.
But I know, but it's one of those tough decisions that you got to make. It's a business decision. You have to say, well, what's the money being used for, and what's the benefit? We already know, from what I'm hearing, we've got participation on the youth side. We don't have a ton of participation on the senior side.
But we have enough. I mean, when they're providing I would say, in my opinion, when I see over there, is we have a very active senior center from 8 till 1. It's full. The tables are all full, there's people in there, it's constantly busy.
Okay.
After that point, we don't. It's gone. It drops off. Okay.
I never see the parking lot full.
Well, and there's a bus that goes around and picks these people up.
Yeah, a lot of probably don't go there.
And they come from Rainier Vista. It isn't, not all of them are driving. Anyway, so when I look at that, I guess my thought process is, okay, what are we not doing to create activities? I got a calendar that we're going to cribbage here, we're going to do this and this and this. There's nobody there doing it, okay? Granted, it's on, so that tells me those are not activities that are needed. So by not having somebody in place that can identify or have the skill set, to understand that we're not meeting the needs of our community. I want to focus on how do we get that. So if we reduce the hours for now at the community center, and then saying, look, it's not being utilized, we need to reduce the hours. And focus, and from there, let's decide how we're going to move forward with this.
What gain do we get? What resource or reinvestment do we get? Does that mean we're going to reduce hours of FTEs by doing that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then those resources.
I would not have anybody over there if there's not
Okay.
people there, that's how I would view it, because they're not doing anything other than providing this service, right? We we have a bus driver that brings people here, we have the cooks here, we provide this lunch, it's a social thing for our community, for our seniors and others. But after, when the bus driver starts taking people home, that's when the attendant goes away, the attendance is gone.
I guess my concern is, though, maybe it's because of the size of the building. The building probably only holds, occupancy load is probably like 50.
I think it's 46, something like that, yeah.
And we're a community of over 7,000 now, and we're talking about spending, what's the budget for the community?
I think, isn't it 100? What's our budget for the community services, including youth and seniors? And it seems like it's right around 100,000.
I would say it's more than that, but the salaries are, between the 3 salaries, I'm thinking it's 125.
So I'm looking at, we're talking about a population of 7,000, we're talking about an average use that probably averages 25 to 30 people, and then however many youths are serviced in the youth side. When you look at it from a percentage standpoint, it starts looking like we're subsidizing something rather than having an appreciable, valuable tool for our community.
I have a question. Is the community services, the youth and senior, eligible for nonprofit status?
Yes.
So would that help?
That would help.
We used to have.
We used to have it. It needs to be brought back to the table.
Honestly, I suspect that's a big part of the collapse of turnout too, is all the infighting that went on around that when it fell apart.
And so, like I said, it's just calmed down there. And I'm really apprehensive about upsetting the apple cart, but I also have to be mindful of how we're spending our time. And how do we create an efficient service?
And right now, what I'm hearing is not really much of a recommendation beyond bringing someone in that might be able to harness all of this, right?
Would they get the nonprofit status back this season?
That would be great. I think it's something that, because the nonprofit was made up of a board of members of the community who made up that board. And so you would have to bring these people together, create a board, and have them go after the nonprofit status.
Yeah.
And it's not, I have all the paperwork, I found it, I have all the paperwork, that we can probably get this going, but that hasn't been on the top of my list.
Right, it's a commitment. The board has to be a minimum of 3. I think getting that, writing a letter is the easy part, and getting it
Right, just getting it
developed. It's a 501c3,
Right.
is all you're submitting for it.
Right.
And I don't think it would be
We can
difficult.
copy everything that was already done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's just having the right people in place and there's just been some problems.
Are we gonna spend much more
I
time
really
on
didn't
this
want to.
item?
but
Huh?
I didn't
There is
expect to spend this
several
much
other things
time.
we wanna get through,
Right.
I don't wanna.
I wanted to bring it to council's attention
I
and let
understand.
you understand that this is kind of one of the focuses of,
It is a critical issue we need to address.
pardon me?
Like, it's a critical issue because of the cost associated and the benefit.
So he just stepped down.
They don't nonprofit though.
Well, and that's another thing, that's another avenue. And one of the things too is, not all the grant funding came from government entities. There are a lot of big business or nonprofits out there that have money to spend, so it's not just.
Like PCS.
Right.
Well, if they can write it off, that's gonna be a big.
But it's tough,
Right, you're right, because we don't have the nonprofit status.
I honestly believe when the YMCA opened up is when I saw a decline in the use here. At least for
That was
my
about
youth.
the same time as.
No, because that YMCA has been open, 10 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Huh?
has, because my daughter, yeah,
I used to go to that when my daughter was in school.
Yeah. my daughter was there.
It's been there for quite some time. And I don't
Well,
know if the decline's on one particular thing. I just think we're not offering what is needed. That's what,
At one point, they were even looking at emergency services
Correct.
here as well.
Yeah.
Out of that line.
and that's an opportunity we still can have.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Okay, yeah, we continued on because you walked out of the room.
I know.
All right.
Okay. I want to talk about,
You got 10 minutes.
no questions. So, Leanne and I have been talking about the general fund and the impact we're seeing to it this year that we want to bring up to you, and the street impacts. But before I get into that, something came up to me from the meetings today, the reports today from Lance and Jack, and questions about why we have permits, or why the city code has all these extra things in it, and is it necessary? Well, you know that utilities funding comes from their own revenue streams, and they have, so that they can affect us. We can raise them, lower them. So, and there are grants there, or trust fund loans, a lot of ways for the utilities to be handling their expenses and their infrastructure. General fund, not so much. It has some significant revenues, but over the last 10 years, they've almost been gutted by Tim Eyman and people like him as far as passing initiatives. So I went and looked at the initiatives since I-695 in 1999. And so you have a bunch of initiatives that reduce the ability to tax and cut taxes to the bone. And then you make it a supermajority on I-1053 in 2010 to even pass any tax increase. So, because for some reason it's been the perspective of the public that all governments waste money. And we know the federal government kind of sets the pace on that, but in my experience, that's not true in small and for local government. However, it's really impacted us in our streets and our general fund. Okay, now we come into 2015 and then going into 16, and the impacts when these taxes first came out back in the early part of the century, people were like, we're not gonna, it's not gonna hurt us. Well, now it's starting to hurt us. Our streets, our highways, there's no money, but the 695 gutted that. The state has tried to figure out ways, the counties tried to figure out ways, and even the cities come up with other taxes that you don't vote on, just so we can get the infrastructure to continue to run. And so we're looking at transportation benefit district. We're looking at transfers from other funds to help out funds, which is really limited. We're even looking at solid waste contracts so that we can put some money into areas that would help directly, like streets, because there are impacts on streets, and some cities do that with franchise fees. So I understand all these. What I want to explain is that there's a cost when we do this. And Leanne and I have been going over this together. And so briefly I wanted to talk about, before I forget, why the permits? And permits should only cover the cost of staff time and any other impact on the city's infrastructure. If we need to review those, we are. We will continue to do so, and council sees the need areas, please let us know so that we can do that. But that's why we have those, not to make money, it's just break even on those areas. Okay, so let's get back to, so the first thing I put down was the solid waste contract, because I have a better understanding of how that works now. Whoever we deal with, I understand that the committee wants to share some gains with the public, and I appreciate that, because we all know our utility rates are going up and up and up everywhere. And so, while that might be a good idea on the outside, we don't really know the impact it's going to have, other than I can tell you it's going to cost the general fund, and if you net out the transfer over the last couple of years to streets, it's still going to cost the general fund up to $50,000, just based on the 120 and the 150 we usually get, and then the cost of what's going to streets. So that does concern me and Leanne somewhat, because the general fund needs to be healthy for your city to run well. I bring up this reverse transfer here. At the end of last year, when we were closing out the LID fund, there was $400,000+ in there. So we transferred it to the general fund, and then we transferred it straight to the capital improvement fund. And the reason we didn't transfer straight over is you can't. RCW says you have to roll any LID left over into the general fund for its choice of uses. Now, since we're not going forward with any city hall improvements, it appears for this year, we might need that money for other activities that the council wants to run, and what the staff wants to propose. We even could transfer that directly over to the reserve fund. So I'm just saying, since we've already transferred it once, it would be easy to transfer it back, and then decide what you want to do with that. We have a number of issues we'll talk about, whether it be transferring the streets or whatever project. The TBD, we talked about this quite a bit at the finance committee level and at staff level. I think understanding that there's other uses that you can have for this side streets, or really it's transportation. Streets is a part of transportation. So yes, you can use it for maintenance, you can use it for capital. But from what I've heard, you can also use this to make debt payments that relate to street projects. I'll give you an example. So you have a project, you want to spend $2 million on really solid maintenance for your streets. It would have a really good impact on overlays and whatnot in 2016 or 17. So you go out and you do geodet. We have no geodet right now. We have, not many cities can say that. We have a rooftop of about $8.5 million that we can borrow up to right now. It goes up every year with the amount of assessed valuation going up. So council approves $2 million, and I have this study that I had a gentleman do for me who works for an organization that does revenue bonds and geo bonds, and the payments for $2 million is $145,000 a year. So let's say that's what we bring in with our TBD. So you use that to pay for that, so you're not hurting the general fund at all, yet you're helping the street infrastructure. So that's just an idea. I know that there's some that are looking at it like, yeah, we don't want to put another $20 on the citizens. And I understand that, but we need to realize the cost of running the city well. Lance and Jack spoke to that, and while I'm concerned with that, I know that we can adjust what we need to do for the utilities to have that happen. I'm concerned, though, that we start robbing the general fund. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean just taking the money from the fees on streets and fees other senior centers and things like that, and all of a sudden you're not balancing the general fund. And so we're not there yet, but that's one area I just want to caution the council. And I will be bringing numbers for this when we have our budget meetings. Yes, Jeff.
Something King County has done, and some of the other cities, larger cities mostly, have done to try to give a perspective on this is they've gone through and identified which streets they're going to allow to return to gravel, which ones they're going to allow to close out of the existing street inventory because there isn't the funding for it.
Right.
Something like 30% of King County travel is on streets that the county has formally said it's going to allow them to close when they deteriorate far enough there just isn't going to be maintenance on them anymore. And we haven't done anything official like that in Pacific, but you can see, just go out and look at the streets, that we're not keeping up with the deterioration of existing streets. Would it help support funding to have staff do an analysis of how many streets can we actually afford to maintain under current funding, and which are the ones we're going to say, okay, this street doesn't get maintained anymore?
And that's what, when Lance spoke to having that study done, because I've had this conversation with him, and he said that will help us to make those decisions. We can't just go in and say, like he said, well, this street over here looks really bad, we need to prioritize these. We need a professional consultant to do that so that we can so the council can make well-informed decisions. We don't want to spend the extra money if we don't have to, obviously.
Right.
Could be a six-figure amount, I don't know if it's that high, but it's going to be a significant cost. But if we have the TBD to help out with that, that would be great, and then we would actually have our plan. Then it's a matter of council saying, here's the priority, here's the list in front of us, but maybe we let this one go to gravel. I would be one of the best that the county's ones that are going to gravel are probably a lot in unincorporated kind of where they're way off.
Like West Valley.
Right.
It's going to be allowed to go down to one lane with no winter maintenance.
And that's a well-traveled road, though, so I mean, that's pretty bad, but yeah, so.
But there are alternatives. People can go 167, people can go frontage, so.
Yeah. So, and it really comes down to what the council wants and are you, the citizens, understanding these decisions because they are going to impact their daily life. And that's the big thing about this, and I put the expenditures on the back side of the paper, and it's all a policy decision, but even the union contract has an impact on 2015 and 16. I mean, and beyond that, what I'm saying is that right now, with the police negotiations, we're that close to having a deal, and we're that close to going to interest arbitration. I'll be coming to the council on May 11th, and I'll tell you what the latest proposal was. But so I'm working on the public works clerical union costs too. We don't know. I put them out in the budget, guessing. Now it could go up. So if we throw that in with the officer we are already going to hire, the police officer, there's more money coming out of the general fund. Now, we think the officer can generate revenue, but we're not sure, because it'll be safer, because of traffic, whatever. But we still have to have the money up front. Public works, okay, so, and then the community services manager, that's also gonna take money out. So, when you add all these up, you come up with over $100,000 of expenses we weren't really sure about coming into this year, that we're gonna have this year. So, maybe we don't hire the community services person until next year, but still, I wanna have the ability to balance the general fund, so I need to let you know, as the leaders and decision makers of the community, how this impacts it. I understand the concerns for streets, and I understand there's options to deal with that. The last thing I wanna talk about is debt, okay? Debt in the public sector, forget the federal government, I'm talking about them. We're forced to balance our budget, so we're never gonna go to that part of debt where we're top heavy, right? We don't have the luxury of the federal government to keep going deeper into debt. That's the one thing I think the city has done pretty well, is manage their general fund debt. Even the debts in the other utility funds are low. So if you have to use that to stretch to the area where the city is viable, because I think we're viable now, but we're gonna do some things which are gonna make it challenging, because you may have to hire an extra staff person, in stormwater. So how are we gonna make it work? And we don't want to start robbing the utility funds to help pay for streets beyond what it should, and it can't just do anything for general fund other than the citywide allocation. So I want you to consider debt as a viable alternative for now to get from point A to point B, whatever we determine that is, with streets and perhaps with parks, because parks isn't even impacted by this maintenance, park maintenance, and with community services. Those are the three areas which really have no revenue coming in, and a lot of expenses. Yes, so the budget for community services, $272,000. Now, that includes insurance, but that's small, that's only $12,000 of it. But still, that's a lot of, there's payroll, there's the benefits, and then there's the cost of everyday supplies and repairs and maintenance and all of that. So, and I can guarantee the revenues aren't anywhere close to that. So, it's a real cost, it's a real decision to make, but we have alternatives to making this work. Now, we don't have, I used to think maybe we'd use the debt to help out the city hall, but that's asking too much. I think so, my own opinion, no. But for smaller things like this, it's there, it's available, and it's something to consider going into 16 and 17. Yeah.
I think, when you look at the two options for the debt that you're talking about us incurring, one is voter approved, the other is, councilmatic. And what little bit of research I've seen on it, the councilmatic option is a higher interest rate, and you can't get as much. And you have to come up with a revenue stream that you're gonna use to pay it off. Voter approved, it's like any other voter-approved initiative, it's an additional burden on the taxpayers. And I think one of the problems that we've had, I know when last time the request for funds came out for streets, there was no plan. And I think the thing with the taxpayers and trying to get something out of them is they have to see the benefit for the cost. And so they have to see what appreciable benefit is there for me to approve funds if the city can use it somewhere else. And so I think in how it's campaigned, if we have a prioritized list, I think this study that Lance wants us to do for streets is probably, I hate spending money on something like that. It sounds like it's going to be a necessary evil, and any plan we put together is going to have to include the alternative and the option, like Josh said, what streets are if we don't do something, this is what we can look forward to in the next 5 to 10 years. And if people can see that, okay, we have a plan, we're gonna fix, these are the priorities in town, these are the streets that are gonna initially get fixed, these are the streets that will get fixed the following year, these are the streets that will get fixed the year after that, I think we'll have a better chance of securing more revenue that won't impact our general fund, and it'll have a method. And if the voters turn it down, then we need to do I think more what Josh is saying is, you know, the only way we're gonna survive with our streets is to, you know, quit maintaining them and let them go back to gravel. And, I think that's, I mean, I'm willing to do a councilmatic way to get some of it done, but I don't, the reality is that we can't do enough. There's not enough there to actually do it right. And if you let people know, the one benefit to putting that money towards streets versus the city hall, which I don't support using that method for a city hall complex, is what are we doing to improve the values of people's homes? What are we doing to improve the value or quality of life for our citizens? And the new city hall complex, people won't see the value in it as readily as improving their streets. If we fix their streets, we put the sidewalks in, we start putting our power cables underground, and we clean up the look of the city, we improve their property values. When we improve the property values, we improve our assessed value. When we improve our assessed value, we improve our revenue streams. And that's the tact I think we need to take with it, and that we should take, and we should start planning that, because I'd like to see us go to the voters before we take action as a council to do it councilmatically. And that's my opinion on it, and I think we do need to discuss it, and we need to debate it, and it's an important issue for everybody. When you go out and talk to anybody in the community, that's all you hear. Our streets are crap, and, you know, if we're gonna get anything, we gotta get community buy-in.
So, did you have any further?
One last thing about municipal capital improvements. So, we may end up having to do something before we're ready to do something. So, what I would like council to maybe appreciate and also support is doing a study that can tell us where the dangerous areas are. We've talked about that, and I know that Leanne probably didn't talk about that, but before we don't have the ability to do that, something to that effect, so we can understand what we're looking at down the road. Because I think right now we don't have that understanding fleshed out for you. And so if we had that, I think that would make it easier to make some long-term decisions.
Okay. So, and we're running out of time, we had 20 minutes, and I was hoping to spend a little bit more time on this area.